Did you know that out of all the hundreds of thousands of wild plant species growing all over planet Earth, almost everything you will ever eat comes from just 12 of them?
Yeah, it's honestly a pretty staggering statistic when really try to wrap your head around it.
It really is. I mean, we walk into a supermarket and think we have endless choices, right?
Right, but the reality of our food supply is just much, much more focused than it looks on the surface.
Well, welcome to today's deep dive, everyone. We have a really fantastic mission for you today.
We do. We are exploring a concept that kind of completely shifts how you view everyday items.
Exactly. We're looking at origins and perspectives. First, we are tracing where the food on our lunch trays actually comes from.
And the massive teamwork it takes to get it there.
Yes. And then we're going to examine the books we read to figure out how the person telling the story, well, how they changed the story itself.
Because whether you're looking at a map of crops or like reading the pages of a book, you're learning to become a source detective.
A source detective, I love that.
Yeah, you're asking, where did this come from and who is telling me about it?
Well, I have our source documents all lined up, and we're going to start with the food side of things.
Sounds good.
The title of our first source is New Places Affect How We Eat. And I'm going to read the first paragraph directly from the text here.
Go for it.
It says, different climates produce different food crops. Sugarcane and coffee are grown in the tropical region of Brazil, and much of the world's rice comes from warm, humid regions in China. Cold weather is required for the majority of the wheat grown in the United States.
Okay, so the big central word driving everything in that paragraph is climate, right?
Right.
And climate basically just refers to the long-term normal weather patterns in a specific area.
Right, so just like you wouldn't wear a heavy winter coat to the beach in the middle of summer.
Exactly. Plants need specific weather outfits, so to speak, to grow. They are completely locked into their native climate.
Oh, weather outfits, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, like if you take a tropical coffee plant from Brazil and you plant it in a freezing winter storm here, it won't just be unhappy.
I haven't stood.
The water inside the plant cells will literally freeze, expand, and just shatter the plant from the inside.
Oh, wow. So they physically cannot survive if the temperature is wrong.
Exactly. And the text also pointed out that wheat requires cold weather.
Yeah, the text said cold weather is required for the majority of the wheat.
Right, because wheat seeds actually need a long freezing winter nap. That freeze sends a signal to the plant that spring is coming so it knows when to sprout.
Geography is kind of like a strict menu then. It dictates what can grow where.
It really is.
But our text explains how we figured out a workaround. Let me read the next two sections out loud.
Okay.
It says, global markets. Trade between countries brings us foods we do not grow at home. Approximately 15% of our food supply is imported.
That's a lot of imported food.
Yeah, and then under narrow focus, it says, 3/4 of the world's food production comes from a dozen plants and 5 animal species.
Let's unpack that narrow focus for a second. 3/4 of global food production comes from just 12 plants and 5 animals.
That's so tiny.
I know. We're talking about core crops like wheat, corn, rice, potatoes, and soybeans. And, cows, chickens, pigs, sheep, and goats.
Wait, think about your school cafeteria. If they announced they only had 12 plant ingredients to feed the whole school for the entire year.
You'd probably assume you were going to be eating the exact same bowl of mush every single day.
I would definitely think that.
But we avoid the daily mush because of how those ingredients are processed, like wheat becomes pizza dough and pasta.
And corn becomes taco shells and breakfast cereal.
Exactly. But this brings up a huge logistical question, doesn't it?
It really does.
Yeah.
And I actually want to push back on this a little bit.
Sure. What are you thinking?
I mean, I understand importing dry things like rice from across the world, but when I go to the store, I see those little plastic cartons of super fresh, delicate strawberries.
Oh.
And I know those go bad in my fridge in just a few days.
So, wait, so our food doesn't just magically teleport to the grocery store shelves?
No, it definitely does not teleport. The answer is actually an incredibly fast-paced, massive human effort.
Well, let me read this section about that from the source. It's titled Go with the Grow.
Perfect.
It says, farming in the United States depends heavily on migrant seasonal workers. These workers move from place to place as different agricultural products become ready for harvest.
Right, because spring and summer weather arrive at totally different times depending on where you are on the map.
Oh, so the crops don't all get ripe on the same day.
Exactly. It creates this giant wave of ripening fruit moving slowly across the country.
A wave of fruit.
Yeah, so strawberries might hit peak ripeness in a warm southern state in March. Thousands of workers harvest those fields by hand.
Because machines would just squish them, right?
Right, machines would destroy them. So they're picked by hand, rushed into refrigerated trucks, and driven through the night.
But a month later, it's too hot in the south, and the wave has moved north.
So the workers literally have to pack up their homes and follow the wave.
Yep. They travel hundreds of miles to set up in a new location just to catch the next crop that's perfectly ripe.
That is just an amazing amount of teamwork. It totally changes how you look at a simple strawberry in your lunchbox.
It really does. You start seeing all the invisible hard work inside of it.
Okay, so speaking of changing how we see things, our source actually has a super fun riddle here.
I love riddles. Read it.
Okay, I'll read the text box right here. What do you call a plant that you can use as kindling, lunch, or shampoo? Or one that you can use to write a letter, sail a ship, or make a shirt? Many cultures have grown multi-purpose crops like these.
So this is introducing the idea of a multi-purpose crop.
Which is just so cool. I mean, think about it. It's amazing that one single plant can be seen in so many different ways. Like, if you're a hungry person, you see that plant and think, oh, yay, lunch. But if you're a sailor, you look at the exact same plant and think, well, that would make a great sail for my ship.
Right. The plant itself hasn't changed its atomic structure or anything. It's the exact same plant in the exact same dirt.
Right.
What changes is the perspective of the person looking at it.
Oh, and that is a perfect transition for our deep dive.
It really is.
Because just like one plant can have many different uses depending on how you look at it, a story can completely change depending on whose eyes we're looking through.
Exactly. We are shifting from where our food comes from to who is telling us our stories.
So let's pull up our next source documents about fiction and point of view.
Let's do it.
I'm going to read the definitions directly from the text first. It says, fiction is a story involving made-up characters and events. Realistic fiction describes characters and events that could be real.
So to give a really simple, kid-friendly example here,
Please do.
if you're reading a story about a giant, fire-breathing dragon swooping down to eat your math homework.
Huh. I mean, I wouldn't complain, but that's fiction.
Right, pure fiction. Dragons don't exist. But realistic fiction would be a story about a new kid feeling super nervous walking into a classroom on their first day of school.
Because that totally happens in real life.
Exactly. The character might be made up, but the feelings and the events could absolutely be real.
Okay, let's look at how the author actually tells that story. I'll read the spotlight on genre bullet points.
Go ahead.
It says, in first-person point of view, the narrator, or storyteller, describes events from his or her own perspective, using pronouns such as I, me, we, and us.
Right. First person.
And then, in third-person point of view, the narrator is outside the action and describes events and the thoughts and feelings of characters using pronouns such as he, she, they, and them. Oh, wait, I need to read one more part.
What's that?
It defines voice. It says, the voice of the narrator, developed through an author's word choice, gives the story a unique sound.
That's a great point. Point of view, or POV, is basically the camera angle the author chooses.
Oh, I like to explain point of view as being like a pair of magical sunglasses.
Magical sunglasses. I like that. How does that work?
Well, if you put on the first-person sunglasses, you only get to see exactly what one single character sees right in front of them.
Okay, yeah.
But if you put on the third-person sunglasses, it's like you can fly like a bird high above the school playground. You can look down and see what everyone is doing all at once.
That is such a good visual.
Our source actually has a really good activity about this. I'll read the turn and talk prompt.
Let's hear it.
It says, discuss different purposes for reading Weslandia and the circuit. For example, you may want to compare the effects of narrators' points of view.
And just a tip for everyone listening, if you get an assignment like that in school, always remember this idea of comparing perspectives. That's exactly the skill your teachers are looking for.
Okay, so let's actually compare those effects right now.
Let's do it.
The text has this great infographic about the effects. I'll read the first-person POV side. It says, it is a character in the story who is involved in the action.
Right.
And the effects are, limits information to one person's view, allows readers to connect more closely to narrator, requires readers to determine whether narrator is reliable or trustworthy.
Okay, that last one is huge. The unreliable narrator.
Yeah, what does that mean exactly? If they're using I and me, shouldn't we trust them?
Well, think about a playground argument.
Okay, recess drama, I know it well.
Right. If your friend comes up to you and tells you a story using I and me, they might, conveniently leave out the part where they started the argument.
Wait, really? Oh, I see.
Yeah, because you're getting their highly emotional view of it, but they might not be telling you the whole truth.
So first person is kind of like getting a secret whispered directly into your ear, but you have to figure out if this secret is 100% true.
Exactly. You have to be a source detective and decide if they are trustworthy.
That's super interesting. Okay, let me read the effects of the third-person POV now.
Okay, what does it say?
It says the narrator is an outsider who is not involved in the action, and the effects are provides information on one or more characters, allows readers to understand behaviors and motivations of one or many characters.
Okay, so third person is taking off the first person glasses and flying like that bird above the playground again.
Right.
And it specifically helps us understand motivations. It helps us understand why people do things.
Oh, like watching a movie where you get to see everything.
Exactly. Imagine there's a kid in your class who's acting super grumpy.
Okay.
If you just see them through your own limited first-person view, you might just think, wow, that kid is really mean.
Yeah, because they're frowning at me.
But if you had a third-person view, you might know that earlier that morning, they lost their absolutely favorite toy.
Oh, wow. So you get to understand everyone's feelings, not just your own.
Right. You realize they aren't mean, they're just sad. It totally changes how you see them.
That is incredible. It really brings the whole deep dive together, doesn't it?
It really does.
Because whether you are, looking at a bowl of rice and realizing it required a warm, humid climate in China.
And the hard work of all those farmers.
Yes. Or whether you're reading a realistic fiction story and trying to figure out if the first-person narrator is actually trustworthy.
You're practicing the exact same superpower.
You are looking at the source and understanding the perspective.
You've got it. And actually, before we wrap up, I want to leave everyone with a really fun, kind of brain-bending question.
Oh, I love these. Let's hear it.
It combines both of our sources today.
Okay, I'm ready.
Imagine the story of your breakfast. But what if that story was told in the first-person perspective by the wheat itself?
Wait, the wheat is talking.
Yeah. It's traveling all the way from a freezing cold farm in the U.S., getting squished and baked just to become your cereal.
Oh my gosh.
How would that change the story of your morning?
Well, from the wheat's perspective, I'd be the terrifying giant monster at the end pouring milk on them. That is hilarious. It totally flips the story.
It really does. The hero and the villain swap places depending on whose eyes you're looking through.
Well, that is a perfect thought to end on. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive, everyone.
Keep being source detectives.
Absolutely. Keep asking questions about where things come from and who is telling the story. See you next time.